Merkurs, and wow, I saw that drone. Well, Merkur, that's pretty unique. So if you go to my gentleman in the purple shirt, he will help you get parked.
Okay.
And then registration's up on the other side of this big food trailer.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yep.
I'm glad someone knew what a Merkur was.
I do. Poor guy. Oh.
Hey everybody, it's Doc. Welcome to the channel. So you guys are going to start thinking that I'm only showcasing my own vehicles this season, but really that's kind of how the schedule is laying out, and I'm hoping to catch up with some friends and some other cool vehicles. But for right now, for today, it's my 1988 Merkur XR4Ti, and we're going to change up the flow a little bit today because we're actually taking it to a car show. So we're going to talk about it a little bit on the way. You'll get to see it at the car show, and then maybe tomorrow I'll get it out and we'll do the detailed walk around, and you'll get to see all the cool features of this very cool car. So let's get in the car and let's go. So we are headed to Hedrick, Iowa, where there's a little car show and a celebration called Barbecue Days, and that also happens to be where my little clinic is at. So we're doing an open house for our new building. And to tell you a little bit about the Merkur. The Merkur is based on a European car called the Ford Sierra, and there were many iterations of the Ford Sierra. There were 2 doors, 4 doors, 4-wheel drive. There was actually even a Ute version. And this was a fairly popular car in the early 80s in Europe and also in England. And Bob Lutz, who was the director of Ford Europe at that point, I think, decided that this would be a great car to bring to the United States to compete with the likes of the very popular BMW 3 Series. And they thought that they could be very competitive both in price and in quality. The dollar was strong, it wasn't the euro, the Deutschmark was weak at the time, and so like I said, the margins looked really good for bringing this car to the United States. The problem they had was they weren't sure exactly how to market the car, and they didn't do a very good job of it because they really picked the wrong marketing company to do it, who really didn't know anything about cars, particularly European cars. And Bob Lutz's original idea was to have the car be sold under basically other dealers, perhaps, you know, with an association with Mazda or with Volvo, which I think Ford had strong associations with, or maybe even owned at the time, and that didn't happen. What happened was Ford corporate decided fairly unwisely to try and sell the car through Mercury dealerships, and you know, Mercury at the time, Lincoln Mercury at the time was basically old people's cars. And when you sell old people's cars, you also have old people's salesmen. And so they didn't really know how to sell this relatively higher end European car. Kind of just a setup for failure, which is unfortunate. In order to get the car into the United States, it had to pass emissions, and the current power plant in the Sierra in Europe was not going to work for that. So what they did was they decided to go with a really solid power plant that was originally in the Pinto, and then it was updated to be in the Turbo Thunderbird and the SVO Mustang. So it was a variation of that. Again, really rock solid motor used in racing, and essentially, you know, it was the perfect motor for the vehicle. They had thought about putting the 5.0 liter Mustang engine in it, and I believe that if they had done that, we would still see an iteration of this car around to this day. But they ran into basically space problems under the hood and there was a lot of issues with, I think, the weight of the engine and the front suspension, so that never happened. The problem with putting a 4-cylinder turbo in the car was basically at the time Americans really weren't into the idea of small displacement turbo motors, although Chrysler did have a pretty good go of it with their 4-cylinder turbos. Essentially, the combination of the things that I talked about, basically the car was met with a lot of lackluster response because it didn't have very good marketing, it didn't have very good salespeople, and the power plant that it had really didn't put it up to par with American taste, something like the Mustang. Now Ford was looking to compete with the BMW, which this car was cheaper than the BMW, but it was still $16,000. Now if you put that into today's dollars, that's about 50 grand. That's a lot of money to fork out for a car like this, even though the car had a lot of really cool features. It stood out against the grain of the vehicles that were on the road at the time, and actually it had a very low drag coefficient that was lower than almost any vehicle on the market at the time, so it also got extraordinarily good gas mileage, and for the time it was actually really quick. We're talking 0 to 60 in I think 7-ish seconds, and that was quite respectable for the time. Pop our sunroof here so we don't get any buffeting. There we go. I would say overall, this car is probably one of the best windows down cars I've ever had, because it seems to move the air through and efficiently, which older cars of that time kind of did, because not everybody had air, and unfortunately my air conditioning doesn't work very well, so it's going to be a very hot day and I'll be driving without air. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear me okay. One of the cool things about this car is actually the previous owner, because he took really good care of the car, and the owner before him, this car had 4 previous owners, and as I've mentioned before, the guy I bought it from, great guy, took really good care of the car. The owner before him actually pumped a lot of money into the car, somewhere to the tune of $10,000 to $11,000, and it was all lots of new parts and stuff like that. The downside to it was that he entrusted probably the wrong people to do it, and they didn't do a very good job of it. So the guy that I bought this from, he's a Ford guy, he's got a world-class Thunderbird turbo coupe, and he went through and basically did all the troubleshooting and the sorting of this car, so it's basically the cool car that I'm driving today, and so far it's been super reliable. Patty and I drove it back from New York City with no issues at all, and it runs like a champ. I may jinx myself, but this car never gets close to overheating, and I've got about a 30-minute drive. We're going to have 93, 94 degree temperatures today, and I feel fully confident that I'm going to do well and make it, and it's a fun car to drive, and it's a great day to be out because it's sunny, it's nice, and what the hell, we're going to barbecue days, man. It's going to be fun.
Haven't seen many Merkurs in my while. I saw that drove well, Merkur, that's pretty unique. So if you go to my gentleman, the purple shirt, he will help you get parked.
Okay.
And then registration's up on the other side of this big food trailer.
Okay, sounds
right,
good. Thanks.
Yep.
I'm glad someone knew what a Merkur was.
I do. Poor guy. Oh.
car show is over, let's do a walk around of the car now. Here she is in all of her glory, and while the Merkur doesn't appear to be that radical of a design today, particularly with aerodynamics, this is something that was really, really unusual in 1985. And so what you have here, a vehicle that had a drag efficient that was 0.34, which was the lowest drag coefficient of pretty much any production vehicle that was available in the United States at that time. And the styling, from the time, at that point, vehicles were shaped like bricks. The grills were straight up and down, and that was how it worked. They're just huge bug catchers. Now, looking at this vehicle, we've got the headlights are pretty flush. Now, these are Cosworth headlights, but the same thing. They just look better than the headlights that came with it. But you can see the grill is kind of slanted backwards. The hood has a gentle slope up with that little bit of a hump, and there's no grill. There's no radiator grill. We've got little slots here and there, and that certainly helps with the aerodynamic efficiency of the vehicle. And as far as I know, in stock form, these vehicles really didn't have any problems with overheating. My Merkur has a different radiator in it, a much larger radiator, so it doesn't even ever get close to overheating. But other things with the vehicle as far as aerodynamics go, you've got the lower cladding, which was designed to help with aerodynamics, and then in particular all of the side molding is kind of inset. A little bit of a styling cue with this is there's really not a lot of chrome on this vehicle, or bright work, I think is what they called it. And then the door handles are smoothed off and even slightly recessed a little bit, as are the mirrors. So it's a very efficient car as far as wind goes. It was about 2,900 pounds, and at the time they claimed the fuel efficiency was, I want to say it was like 23 miles a gallon, 22 miles a gallon. It's got a 15-gallon fuel tank, so it had really good range. Now, when I drove this vehicle back from New York City, 27 miles a gallon. Not lying. So it's very, very efficient. Now, just doing a little walk around of the vehicle, what we have is we have 10-inch front disc brakes and rear drum brakes with 15-inch wheels. They are kind of the standard Cosworth sort of style wheel, I think you would call it. And there were several different styles of the wheels. There were the ones with a bunch of holes. There were the ones that had bars in them. I think these are probably the most conservative and the most attractive. Now, the most radical thing that came on the XR4Ti was the bi-wing spoiler, which in 1988 they got rid of that and they put on this spoiler, which I believe is off the European XR4i. And it's not a bad looking spoiler. I always thought it kind of looked like they stole it off a Fiero, so I really have never been that in love with it. So in order to switch that over to a bi-wing or maybe a bigger Cosworth sort of spoiler, I'd have to change the rear hatch, which I probably will do because that's one of the defining factors that I love about the Sierra and the Merkur and stuff like that. Now the question is, and I do love just the sunburnt patina on this vehicle, and that's something that only comes with age. You can't make that, and it just looks cool. I don't know what I'll do about that. If I do something with the rear hatch, should I kind of mock up the rear hatch to look like the rest of the patina on the vehicle with a spoiler to match, or should I just repaint the car? So if you guys have any opinions on that, throw it in the comments, because I'd like to hear your opinion. I don't know. I'm kind of torn about it. Also repainting the entire car, I'd have to pump a lot of money into it, and quite honestly, this car is never going to be worth even what I paid for it, I don't think. Continuing our walk around, there is some interesting features on this car that I really love. One, the sunroof is just amazing. It's all hand operated, and it retracts and it tips. And this is a 38-year-old car, and that still functions flawlessly. The other thing that is kind of cool about the wheels here is the fact that underneath this this little mark here. I don't know if I can get it to pop off. There we go. There's actually a keyhole. So you actually take a key, you pop this cylinder out, and then you can remove the little hubcap. That's how you access the lug nuts. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if I'd want to do it in a snowstorm or any bad weather. And then you can see the big old drums in the back there. And these are, just for noting, 195 by 60 R15 tires on there, which are also outdated and I need to replace those. I'm thinking about some other wheels for the vehicle. I don't know what I'm going to do. So again, if you guys have opinions on what wheels I should throw on this vehicle, throw it in the comments. I'd like to hear your opinion. So let's pop the hood. Here's the engine bay, and this vehicle has a 2.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, which essentially in manual form, mine has a 5-speed manual. It's capable of like 175 horsepower, and I want to say that the automatic was slightly less at like 160 horsepower. The cars were supposedly equally as quick because they were tuned just a little bit different, so the automatic could make up the difference. We're talking 0 to 60 times in about 7.5 seconds, probably more like 8, and quarter mile times somewhere around the 15.5 to 16 second mark. The turbo was updated for the Merkur in the respect that it had water-cooled bearings, which made it a bit more reliable. And then, you know, some of the changes that have been done to this vehicle, you can see down here the TFI unit has been relocated. Apparently originally it was near the distributor and it would tend to overheat. And, you know, basically the story was you'd be driving your car all day, it'd be a hot day or something like that. You'd pull into a gas station and it wouldn't start, and people would have to replace the TFI unit. They actually carried tools with them and a spare TFI unit to do that. But the relocation has certainly worked. It's worked in my case because I've had no problems with it. And then taking a peek up here, you can see that I have a much larger than stock radiator, and that was done very well, and it works very well. Like I said before, it doesn't even get close to overheating. Like it barely just gets to operating temperature. And then over here, this little interesting tidbit is the cruise control unit. And very few Merkurs today have operating cruise controls in them. Mine is kind of off and on whether it wants to work or not. It worked all the way back from New York City, but it hasn't really wanted to work for me since then. And from what I can tell, you know, the rumor is that these parts were taken off of V1 rocket. They were designed by Oppenheimer, and they require heavy water or 30 grams of deuterium to actually work. So not very many of them work. Obviously, I'm being facetious. That's it really for under the hood. It's very simple drivetrain, and it's very cool. It's very straightforward and as uncomplicated as you can think of for a relatively modern, we'll call it a sports car, but I guess grand touring car. The interior is pretty standard for, you know, let's say a German coupe of this time period, and the interior is actually in really, really good condition. There are just a couple of tiny cracks in the dash, which is well known for huge cracks. Actually, there was a update, I think it was in '87, where they did some modifications to the dash, but pretty much any 85 through 87, you'll see just these monster cracks in the dash very commonly. And then, you know, the only downside of this interior is my driver's seat is kind of giving way here a little bit, and it's also got some wear marks there, which those can be stained. I don't know how to fix this. If you guys have any ideas on how that can be repaired, I'd appreciate it, because I don't have a lot of resources and I'd actually like to get that done, because I do like these seats. They're super comfortable. They have pretty good bolstering, and one of the really cool functions about this car is it has super modern conveniences at very basic mechanic levels. You know, so I showed you the sunroof and how the sunroof can tip up or it can go back. We'll get back to the seat here in a second. So, but we can also just open the sunroof like that. And how cool, I mean, how cool is that, right? Then the seat also has the function, you know, typical seats go forward and backward, but we also have, whoops, we also have this option here where you can pop that down, and then, I'm gonna hold this back, and then you can elevate the seat or lower the seat. How flippin' cool is that? And of course, 3 pedals. We're gonna pop in here. You do have to pull out my Hot Wheels Merkur. Actually, it's a Hot Wheels Sierra. Now, looking at the dash, you know, a very, very, very German car. Okay, so I grew up with Mercedes diesels, and this is very reminiscent of what a Mercedes diesel, right down to the annoying German buzz when I put the key in. This car does have cruise control. Like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, so you turn it on over here. It really only has one function, and that function is to set. You know, when you kick the cruise control off, it doesn't have any memory, so it is literally what it is. Now, looking at the gauge package, this era of Merkur has 150 mile per hour speedometer. The original ones, I think up until 87, had an 85 mile an hour speedometer. That was based on some stupid laws that the United States had that, you know, essentially, I suppose if you couldn't see that you're going over 85, you wouldn't speed. I don't know. It was kind of dumb. And then, of course, we got our fuel gauge, we got our water temperature. We have 2 turbo gauges in this car. And I'll start up the car and show you how that works. Okay, let me shut the door. So I'm not going to spend too much time in here with the door shut because it's hotter than a 2-peckered billy goat out there. Now, looking at the turbo gauge, let's see here. You can see when I rev it up that we got the analog gauge going, but we also have an LED gauge in the middle, and obviously this was an option. I haven't seen this in many Merkurs, so I don't know how common of an option it was, but it's pretty cool. And then open up the door to get some airflow here, and then we have our radio, which in this car it might work, but the speakers aren't cooperating. And you know, there's the air conditioning over, oops, there's the air conditioning over there. We actually have a clock that actually works. And then here's more of the climate controls. Again, very German in design. And down here, something you don't see too often is a lighter, an actual lighter, and a ashtray, which doesn't hold ashes. I don't think it ever did. Here we have my accessory speaker for running music off my phone because I just don't even feel like messing with the radio. We've got the glove compartment, which is very large. And there's our original XR4Ti mats, which they only put XR4Ti on one side for some reason. Moving back here, we have a little, and this will date the car pretty specifically. We have a cassette case, and in our choices of cassettes which came with the car, by golly, we have Tears for Fears, oh, Tears for Fears again, and then a blank one and some Christmas music. So I don't know what that says about the previous owner, but apparently he liked Tears for Fears. The back seat is actually very accessible and very roomy. There's some pockets on the back seat, and this is a back seat that actually an adult can live and enjoy. It's not bad. I've ridden back here and it's not terrible. We have pull-down armrest here, which is nice. And then, interestingly, we have this little compartment back here, and I have no idea what this compartment is for. I'm keeping the speaker that fell out of the dash at about 150 miles out of New York City. I keep that there for now because I don't know what else to do with it. And then, you know, something that modern cars I think really could use are just cool little pop-out vent windows, because I love them, and it's really nice when you want to drive with the windows down and you want to vent. And also, if you're on a race course, you could pop these windows and not get a lot of buffeting. So that's a lot of fun too. This is also a very well optioned package with the fact that you had manual lumbar support. Pretty cool. And again, I like the fact that everything's manual, because in a 38-year-old car, it's pretty cool that almost everything works because there's not a lot of complexity to it. So we'll take a look at the back, and again, this thing has a respectable trunk in it. I can't remember what I have in the trunk, but also, something you want to notice here, and I may not be able to do this with one hand. This is how you open the back hatch, and the problem is, this hatch is very heavy, and you have to lift with that. And a lot of those broke, so you'll almost see virtually every Merkur out there has a broken thumb lift or finger lift with the hatch. And then you don't see many of these covers here that haven't been cut up for speakers. There's a decent sized spare back here, which just lift up the carpet and lift up some more carpet, and there it is. The car does not have a jack that I can find, so I have to supply that. Actually, that is what this little case here is for. This is where, for all the cars I have that I travel to go get, I carry this with me, which basically is everything you can imagine that you could possibly need in a car, including a jack, including the tools, tire repair kit, that kind of stuff. So when you have old cars, yep, you want to be prepared, and that rifle case allows me to do that. Also, my very primitive anti-theft device, and something for people going to New York. If you're going to New York and you're buying a used car and you don't want to drive without a plate, what I did, and Iowa doesn't give you the option to have a temporary plate. So what I ended up doing was, I actually had a friend who had a sticker laser cutter, and we took all of the information that you would want as far as your 30-day permission, and I put it on a plate. And by God, we were coming through Ohio. We had a trooper following us for quite a while, and I know he's checking out the plate, and it worked because we didn't get pulled over. If we wouldn't have had a plate, we certainly would have gotten pulled over just because we were plateless. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I appreciate you sticking with me for this long. This is my Merkur. I love it. I plan on keeping it for a fairly long time. So if you have any questions, if you have any ideas on how I should keep it, whether I should paint it, whether I should put the big wing on it, how I'm going to fix that seat, I'd appreciate your comments. You guys are awesome. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. We'll see you out there.